Now, I am aware that this is probably one of, if not my weirdest video concepts I've ever done. I mean, the concept that Kirby's Epic Yarn would be someone's favorite Kirby game does seem pretty ridiculous on paper, and I'll admit that. But it is just my personal, genuine feelings towards the game, and I'm not about to fake that on a channel. Now, in this video, I'm not going to be arguing that from an objective point of view, this is the best Kirby game. I'm not going to act like I think it is objectively better than, say, Superstar or Forgotten Land or Planet Robobot, just to name a few examples. This video rather is just me explaining why I personally love and feel so attached to this game despite how little it's talked about, and whenever it is often written off as a baby's game. Now, on a surface level, I totally get why people think this way. I mean, the way the game is marketed, the way the art style is presented, the music of the game, pretty much everything does lend itself very heavily to a casual audience, even within a series known for being a relatively casual series. So anyway, without further ado, this is why Kirby's Epic Yarn is my favorite Kirby game. I think first of all, at its core, everything really comes down to the personality and the collectibles. I'll start off with the former though. In terms of personality, it really doesn't get much more cozy of a game than this. I'm not even specifically talking about the art style or anything like that, by the way. I'm talking about little things like, say, how the level selection works. Every single time you beat a level and unlock a new one, you throw this tile that then organically animates an entire thing in the little hub area where you see the level come to fruition, and it always directly relates with the theme of the next level, and it all just comes together so organically. I really like how the story is told in the style of a flipped children's storybook, and how it's even voice acted, and somehow the voice acting isn't overly campy. I remember as a kid, I always loved the narrator's voice who's reading the story as those little cutscenes are playing out. He has this really deep and comfortable voice to just listen to.
The little blob bits. There was a shimmering piece of spiraling yarn. That's it. That's the magic yarn, Fluff exclaimed.
I think it's really easy for games to shoehorn in voice acting and for it to not come across as compelling or endearing, and then overall kind of ruin my perception of the story, but in this case I think it actually amplifies things. And I think part of the reason why the voice acting works so well in this context too is that it kind of does feel like you are a little kid having a father figure read you the story of what's happening in the game. This is cemented with different scenes being segmented by pages turning, for example. There are so many little animations that Kirby has that add so much to the experience too. Whenever you double click one direction on the D-pad, Kirby will turn into a little car. They could have just made him run, but no, that wouldn't be adorable enough. Whenever you jump up but want to de-escalate slowly, Kirby actually turns into a little umbrella. Once again, they did not have to do this, but it makes it even more cute. I really like how whenever Kirby just jumps in the first place, his feet turn into little springs. Virtually everything about the animation and care that went into the vibe of this game just kind of pulls me in and gives me this feeling of wonder and whimsy that I don't fully get with any other game in the franchise. Once again, that is not saying that other Kirby games don't have life in them, it's just I kind of feel something playing Kirby's Epic Yarn that I don't get from any of the other games. So that all's great, but at the end of the day, if the game itself is boring, then none of this really matters. This is where a common critique of this game, at least from what I see with other people, is that this game's too easy, you can't die, everything is boring. So if I may, allow me to play devil's advocate to those points. Now yes, this is certainly a deviation from the Kirby formula. For example, you aren't able to puff up into the air and flutter around, and you aren't able to suck up enemies to get their copy abilities. And at least me personally, whenever people say that Kirby's Epic Yarn has no fun to it and it's just simply boring to play through, I think that they're kind of wanting the game to be something that it's not. If you are someone that is looking for a more traditional platforming challenge, then of course this is not going to be the game for you, and you are probably going to be wound up disappointed by it. On the point about you not being able to die in Kirby's Epic Yarn, let's just say you fall into a cliff, you just immediately respawn and lose some of your beads, people say that that is a weakness of the game, and I really don't agree. I mean, to be fair, the alternative of this is like every other modern Kirby game or many other Nintendo 2D platformers for that matter, where you accumulate 50 lives without even trying, and then when you do die, it acts as more of an inconvenience than anything. In Epic Yarn, if you die, you just immediately respawn right where you left off, streamlining the experience. I think that having a whole live system like other Kirby games in this context would do the game a disservice. At least to me, the main appeal of Epic Yarn is both a combination of falling into the incredibly comforting and relaxing atmosphere of the levels of the game, but also, very importantly, the collectibles. That is also why I prefer whenever you die, instead of losing a life, you lose beads, because those beads are actually critical with 100%ing the game. Essentially, in Kirby's Epic Yarn, each of the levels has a scoring system, which contains 3 different medals, and depending on how many beads you finish the level with, you get a different medal. So, with that being said, if whenever I did die and I just respawned with 1 less life, but nothing else besides that, I would have ended up getting more annoyed very quickly than anything, so in this case I actually prefer the system that they set in place. However, weirdly enough, the best place where beads are used in the game are the boss fights, and I believe the boss fights of Kirby's Epic Yarn are where the game really shines. Once again, you're not going to tangibly die fighting these bosses, and if that is your scale for what defines a good experience with a boss fight in a game, then of course you're going to hate them whenever you play them, because that is not what the challenge is. Instead, with the boss fights, if you finish with enough beads, it allows you to unlock 2 extra bonus levels with each world. This made it so I actually was more invested in the boss fights in this game than literally any other Kirby game I can think of. I'll just use Kirby's Return to Dreamland as a point of comparison, since it was on the exact same system as Epic Yarn originally, and by the way, it is another game I do really like, so don't think that this is me saying that the game is bad or anything. But in that game, I typically would walk into a boss fight with whatever copy ability I had on me and then just kind of wail on the boss, and then if I did get hit, it would be a minor inconvenience. I might drop the copy ability and have to re-swallow it, but for the most part, I was kind of remained undeterred. In Epic Yarn though, if you want to get those bonus stages, which by the way, I'll get more into the levels, but pretty much every level in this game I really enjoyed, so I wanted to keep playing it and unlock everything. But if you are wanting to unlock those levels, you have to kind of focus on the bosses, because if you get hit, you end up losing a pretty significant amount of beads, which of course you are able to recuperate them, but they can also disappear. Someone else might have a completely different opinion and say that Kirby's Epic Yarn has the worst boss fights in the series, and if that's you, that's perfectly fine and valid. This is just my own point of view. I should also note, by the way, that as with the rest of the game, the boss fights are not hard to get enough beads. It isn't going to be frustrating or anything like that, but it is just kind of fun to focus on that while fighting the bosses, whenever that's just not an experience I personally feel with the other games. Anyway, another random element about this game that sets it apart from the entire rest of the series is the soundtrack. This might be the craziest take I have in this entire video, and probably one of the ones on my entire channel, but this might be my single favorite gaming soundtrack of all time. Once again, I'm not saying it is the best, but it is the one I come back to and listen to the most. To be honest, if you were to ask me what my favorite soundtrack is, my answer would probably flip-flop between this and Super Mario Galaxy. It would just depend on what mood I'm in. But there is just a feeling of comfort and security and warmness that this soundtrack gives me that nothing else musically related is fully immersed me in the same way. The best way I can describe the soundtrack is that it is around winter time, it is incredibly cold outside, and you are just inside of a cabin and you have a massive blanket on top of you, you are sitting right by the fireplace, and you are just listening to incredibly gentle and majestic piano and maybe some strings and some other light instruments like that that have a slight undertone of jazz maybe, and that is just the essence of Kirby's Epic Yarn. A lot of people probably wouldn't even feel that much listening to the soundtrack. I'm sure a lot of it boils down to this being a game I grew up with and nostalgia and everything. I mean, hell, Good Feel literally made Yoshi's Woolly World a few years later, and it has a very similar vibe to Kirby's Epic Yarn. However, I would be lying to you if I said that tracks such as Cool Cave, Dino Jungle, Cozy Cabin, Squashini and Fangora, Treatland, all just to name a few, were not some of the most comfortable pieces of music I've ever heard. Finally though, let's talk about the level levels themselves. Of course, being that there are no copy abilities, one might wonder, well, how do they make these levels interesting? Because it literally is missing the cornerstone of what makes Kirby as a franchise, well, Kirby. To me, the design philosophy of a lot of these levels is very similar to what we see with modern 2D Mario levels. There is some kind of premise or gimmick that the level is built around. For example, in Spaceland, there's a level called Mysterious UFO, which has a gravity shifting mechanic that is slowly expanded upon as the level plays out. Tempest Towers is a level that features wind as the main mechanic, and this is one of the most memorable ones for me whenever I was a kid. A lot of these levels also just have very cute and adorable premises and aesthetics. For example, Dino Jungle has you literally jumping around dinosaurs in a very whimsical jungle. Big Bean Vine is in the first world of the game, and it is a trope that I typically would find annoying, that being a very vertically based level. However, in this case, I think it's done pretty well. I think that in this case, the premise of having Waddle Dees that are tinged to balloons being your main platforms is really cute. And then there are other just various levels that I really enjoy, such as Lava Landing, Blub Blub Ocean, Cozy Cabin, Melody Town. One of the things that was done in order to make these levels a little bit more memorable and unique is having various special abilities that Kirby is able to acquire throughout the journey. Whether it be turning Kirby into a UFO that is able to suck enemies and objects up, or turning you into a dolphin during the water levels, or turning you into a motorcycle to do some really fun track sections, by the way. Now, I will be the first to admit that not all of these are winners. The main culprit of this is the train. This one is incredibly arduous to control with the pointer controls, but it also just turns the pacing to a slog. Thankfully, this power-up is seldom used, and it isn't enough to act as a primary deterrence in me having fun in the game. Anyway though, all of that is why I love Kirby's Epic Yarn. And I know I've already said this multiple times, but I just know I'm going to get comments about it anyway, so I just want to really nail it home. I'm not saying that this is objectively the best Kirby game. For example, I have a podcast called The Special Hour with my friend Donovan Dudd, which you should listen to, by the way, but we've talked various times on that podcast about Kirby, and he frequently says how Kirby Planet Robobot is his favorite game. In fact, I think it's fair to say that most people would rather play Kirby Planet Robobot than Kirby's Epic Yarn, and that's perfectly fine. I fully acknowledge that most of these things that I cited as reasons I love Kirby's Epic Yarn might not apply to other people. So if your favorite Kirby's game is, well, any of the games in a franchise, that's completely valid. At the end of the day, we all have our own experiences with games that shapes our perceptions and opinions. So no, my goal with this video was not to prove to you or convince you that Kirby's Epic Yarn is the best game in the series and needs to be your favorite as well. Rather, I just hope that maybe you saw the game in a new light after hearing my opinion. And if you still hate the game and think that it's useless and slop and just should burn in hell, then, you know, you can feel free to let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you so much for watching the video. As always, I really do appreciate it. If you did enjoy the video, feel free to like and subscribe, as that is the best way to support the channel. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and as always, peace out.